Hello, beautifuls. Welcome back to the Wisdom of Womanhood podcast with myself, Mama Chow,
And
and
me, Pippi.
beautiful Pippa. Mama Chow Pippi.
Pippi.
That's a bit cute. We sound like a band.
Yeah, no,
Like a duo.
Mama Chow and Pippi.
Mama Chow and Pippi.
I'm
How you
excited for
doing,
today's
my love?
topic. I'm really good. Well, I wasn't good. Just to let everybody
Mm,
know, I have been on a unwell journey the last 10 days. I've probably had some gastro bug or something. I literally had diarrhea straight for 9 days and I'm just on the outside of it now. So I am definitely feeling a little bit like that. It's like that unwell hungover, like when you're hungover from the being
yeah.
sick. But I'm feeling a lot better. I've got my ginger tea and talking to you really helps. And
Hmm.
yeah, and just how when we go into those stages of feeling unwell or we're just sick and how much comes up for us in the messages and stuff like that. Like I've had really potent, powerful messages the last few days. So my body's been doing me a service as always.
Of course, as it does, even in the discomfort.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got a really, I think, important conversation and topic today that I think isn't spoken about enough, particularly in our Western culture. I think it's definitely something that has been lost over time, and that many women and many young girls would benefit from more intention and conversation and care. So we are going to be going into the conversation around rites of passage. Rites of passage, the different initiations that occur throughout our lives, all the way from the first initiation of our first bleed, our first sexual experience, and then going further down the track, looking at things like childbirth, menopause, and the final rite of passage, initiation, which is death, the finality of the physical form in this lifetime. And, when we look at how over time, how drastically the family unit has changed, the way that we are in community, how it is not so much of a village dynamic. There's a lot of separation. There's not so many intergenerational families anymore. And it feels as if so many practices and experiences that would have been very second nature, not really that long ago, in a lot of traditional cultures, they just don't exist anymore. And it's a little bit of this like good luck out there in the world, transitioning from girl to woman, and then woman to mother, and then mother to grandmother, and all of these things. And yeah, so we want to come into this conversation, share some of our personal experiences. We'd love to hear some feedback about what your experiences have been in the spaces we're going to go to in these conversations as well. And yeah, and kind of just set a foundation for, let's open this up and be really honest about maybe the lack of initiations that we had, and the impact of the lack of sacredness and acknowledgement of those transitions as well, and how they can actually be really traumatizing.
Yeah.
First bleeds, first sexual experiences, childbirths, they have the potential to be disempowering as opposed to empowering, which is what the ideal situation would be, right?
Yeah. Just something that came up for me was like, I always talk about this, how we've lost that connection to life, as in, for example, just an example, how our ancestors would like, have to go and hunt for food
Mm-hmm.
and they would say
Mm-hmm.
kill a deer and they bring it back to the village and they do like a ceremony and they would like honor the deer and honor the soul and be like, thank you for, providing us with food for the whole village so we can survive. And it kind of relates to rites of passage, like we just said. We've just kind of like it's become just this norm of like, okay, you got your period. Okay, great. Like
Yeah.
my mum never sat me down and said, hey, when you get to a certain age, I mean, I saw my mum, like I would say, what's that, mum? Like she used to wear pads and she was like, oh, I'll tell you when you're older. And she never really did. And it kind of like, I'm blessed and grateful for that experience because I know that when I have my children, I'll be like, hey, when you get to like, older in your age, you're going to have these experiences, and I'm here for you, and this is what's going to happen, and this may feel this way. And I think it's just become this norm, like, oh, just get on with it. There's a lot of this energy of just get on with it. It's like, and that then puts
Well,
us
it's
into
almost
freeze response, doesn't
inconvenient.
it? Because like we're not feeling
Yeah.
those things.
And it's missed opportunity. Even okay. So great place to start. One of the first initiations we go through as women is our first bleed, right? And there has become normalized stigma and shame around our bleeds, around our bodies as women, the shame that sits there so fiercely within such a beautiful, cleansing, potent experience. So that was your experience. I'm gonna tell you what my first experience was. And it's only been the last few years when I've held rites of passage spaces for teenage girls like my daughter and her friends. And when I've started opening up about this, I realized actually how traumatic my experience was. So I didn't live with my biological mother. I lived with my dad and my stepmom. My stepmom had ovarian cancer when she was in her early 20s and had a hysterectomy. So she never bled. So I never, ever lived in a house with a bleeding woman in my younger years. And I never, ever was spoken to about it, ever. I was 9 years old and I woke up in a pool of my own blood and I didn't know what was happening. And the bit that's shocking in itself, right? And you can imagine, and also we were in France at the time. We were not even at home. We were staying in like a family home. And this is the bit that is super interesting, is that somehow at 9 years old, I had already associated whether my vulva, my vagina bleeding with shame, because I remember thinking that I needed to hide this, that I couldn't ask for help, that there must be something wrong with me, that like I needed to just handle this by myself. So I didn't tell my parents, my dad and my stepmom. And I remember this like deep inherent shame and inconvenience. And you know what is crazy about all of that is that imagine the alternative situation that I was in serious medical, it was a medical emergency and I had blood coming out of my body. I would not have sought help because somehow
Yeah.
I had already associated shame with it. And like that just blows my mind,
Yeah.
and if you guys have heard other episodes, I have a lot of suppressed kind of memories from early on. So, whatever has happened, something has happened in my body that there is shame associated with it. And so I hid it for a long time. And it wasn't until I kind of, it gets a bit blurry, but from memory, I think that one of the teachers from my primary school rang my parents because I had blood on my clothes at school one day. And yeah, they were like, I think something's happening with Showie. And so it was not like, and I do remember actually my grandmother, when I was in France during that, when I was over there, initiating a conversation with me about it. So I had one conversation, but that was already after it. And yeah, she took me out for a walk and we kind of spoke about it. But that stayed with me deeply. So from that point on until, I don't know, maybe only a few years ago, did really the remnants of shame dilute. Like even with, so my last partner was the first partner I would openly speak about my bleed with.
Yeah.
And that was from the age of 27. I would openly speak to him. I never did with anyone else. It just wasn't spoken about. We didn't go into it. I would hide it. I didn't want to talk about it. Now I'm super open, and I'll share, where I'm at in my cycle, and I'll be like, hey, just letting you know. And it's great. It's amazing. And it's something that I know people like men that I've been with in the last couple of years have really appreciated, which has been really cool. But the power of a disempowering initiation, right? That was, almost 20 years of me feeling so much shame around a natural part of becoming a young woman. And also because I was so young, the difference between being 9 years old and trying to process it in 13 or 14. Yeah. So I'll share, we'll go into other things, but I just want to share the transmutation of trauma and how potent it can be when you do the work. So my daughter, who's 12 years old now, started showing signs pretty early on, 7 or 8, started showing really early signs of puberty. Great. Myself, my kid stepmom, and my dad all started chatting. Cool. Let's make sure we open up the space, have the conversations, make sure she's got everything there that she needs. We both did in both homes, got her, anything she needed, spoke to her about it in a really supportive way. And her transition into having her first bleed, she was 10, was beautiful. No shame. Like, she, not even like this, the only times that she finds it's a bit inconvenient is like when she's got basketball tournaments and stuff, but just became normal,
Yeah.
and she tells us and we support her through it. And she openly speaks about it. She'll be like, Mom, like I've got really bad tummy cramps today. I'm feeling this and feeling that. And then we also held a rites of passage ceremony for her and the girls in her class when they were all about 10, 11. We had this whole day for them. They came and did all these activities. They did henna and made mandalas and made this beautiful piece of artwork together. And we spoke about puberty and we spoke about bleeds and really openly. And they all asked questions and all the mums were invited. And because for me, it was so important that we give them this celebration as opposed to this shame and convenience, right? And I just thought, like, fuck yes, like this is changing the experiences, changing the patterns, doing the work, like leaning into it so that they don't have to experience what a lot of us did, because so many of us experienced pretty disempowering initiations into our first bleeds.
Thank you for sharing all that because I was 11 and I was actually so in primary school in year 6, we go on like a big group holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being at like what was it called now? It was like a place where you stay in cabins. And I was in a cabin with my two best friends. And that's when I got my first period. So my mum wasn't
Mm-hmm.
around. I had teachers around me. So I can't remember fully like you, like the whole experience, like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really traumatic, but you mentioned a really key word for me twice when you were talking, and that word is inconvenience. And the
Yeah.
reason why it really stood out for me is because as we got to 12, 13, 14, 15 and beyond, I feel like our periods have become an inconvenience in our life. And the reason why I
Uh-huh.
want to talk about this is actually going to be a 2-part episode because there's a lot to it. And I don't want to rush anything because it's really important for listeners because you all will experience different things. But I remember my first couple of periods were quite painful. I had a lot of cramps, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
period pains. And it got to a stage where I was having like 2 days off a month with school just because I was just in agony. And I remember I'm quite passionate about this and I've not really spoke about it in out yet. And this is a really good place to kind of talk to you about it because I went on the pill when I was 12 and a half, something like that. And I stayed on the pill for 15 years. And the pill
Mm-hmm.
was great because when it came to like holidays, I could take extra pills and not come on my period. And it was like an inconvenience. Like, this is what I'm trying to say. Like,
Oh,
there's so many women are just, and this isn't to shame anybody. This isn't to
I
say
know.
being on the pill is the wrong thing. I'm not here to shame anybody. I'm here to share my personal experience and my opinion. Being on the pill for 15 years was probably something that suppressed who I was. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's got more side effects than we realize. Like I feel like it
It
suppresses
does.
and it stunts us, it
Yeah.
stunts our growth. So going on the pill was like, okay, instead of doctors or nurses being like, oh, this is a really like important time for you. Can you like, empowering you to be like, okay, for a day or two, like now when I get my period, that pain, I'm like, oh, this is me. I can do it. The pain becomes
Yeah. And
power.
you're like, yes, my body is cleansing. I'm a
Yeah.
powerful woman.
And as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, you just want the pain to go away. So,
I know.
bless you, like my mom just wanted me to just because she saw me in agony
Yeah.
and I had really bad acne and things like that. And acne was a big like sore point for me. And so going on the pill was like the best thing ever because it cleared up all of my pain. It cleared up all of my skin. The
Mm-hmm.
only downside was I put a lot of weight on, so I started to put that weight
Mm-hmm.
on at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had weight issues ever since, fluctuating weight issues. And I remember one of my coaches at the time, she was a really powerful psychic, and I think I was about 25. That's why when you asked me last week, what would you tell your teenage self and your 26-year-old self? This kind of what I
Mhm.
want, like, I'm glad you chose 26. Because 25, 26, I was thinking about coming off the pill. And she, well, at first she's like, when you do, you will have the most spiritual awakening you've ever had because you'll start to become who you truly are.
Yeah.
And I was like, that makes
Mhm.
sense. I came off it for a little bit and then I went back on it because of
Mhm.
being single, stuff like that. Again, inconvenience. And I want to
Yeah.
teach women to be like, hey, the pill's great because you can have unprotected sex. You can be like reckless, like I was. But if you truly get in touch with your cycle and truly get in touch with you as a woman,
Mhm.
it's easy. I I've not been on the pill now for 5 years, and I am very active sexually with Chris. And I've not, like, obviously I got pregnant last year, but I time it where, hey, like, you need to pull
You know,
out
when
on
you're
this day. Like,
ovulating.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's I've never got pregnant, like, obviously without trying. So I'm
Mhm.
just trying to say, like, if we can empower women to be like, hey, those period pains are actually like your body saying, hey, you're
Yeah.
shedding blood, you're shedding part of your cycle that, hey, the egg wasn't fertilized, it had to be shed, the blood shed, and how beautiful our ancestors would bleed together in red
I
tents.
know.
It was a
Yeah.
beautiful ceremony. So that inconvenience, when you said it, I was like, that's what my period was to me. It was an
Yeah.
inconvenience to me, and that's what brought the shame. Because I'm like, that's part of my womanhood. So that was what I wanted to share about what you said, because
Mhm.
it does become this inconvenience to a lot of young
Mhm.
girls.
And even cycle education, I've always had a really irregular cycle. It is probably for the first time in my life starting to hit into a more regular space. And I know that there were lots of things that have had to move through my body. And I love that you've brought the conversation of contraception into this conversation, because absolutely I agree. This isn't about shaming, but it's about bringing in some education into it, because you're exactly right. I would have been on the pill at 13. Um, and thank goodness that I went to the sexual health nurse and did went and seek support and said, so because at 14 I was sexually active. Because holy moly, if I had got pregnant, I could have, from anywhere from 14 years old. So thank goodness that I did that. And yes, absolutely, in terms of preventing pregnancy. However, I know that being on that contraceptive, and then I was on the jab, I was on depot, which is horrific, the things it's done to the body. If anyone has gone on it and come off it, I know that contraceptive was a contributor to depression, suicidal
Yeah,
ideation,
definitely.
like 100%. And even when, so then I came off as when I was having babies and everything. Even when I was in my last relationship, I said to him, we needed to go on contraceptive. At that point, my cycle was so irregular, it was just impossible to track, and we were really clear. We'd have 4 kids between us. I went and saw a gynecologist who put me on the Marina, which actually was really good. No side effects to my body. It worked really well for my body. It was a thing. And in the conversation of contraceptive, I definitely think different things work better for different people's bodies.
Yeah.
But I said to him, I sat down with him and I said, okay, I'm going back on birth control for the first time in years. I'm actually quite worried that it's going to impact my mental health again. And I'm worried about going back to that person. And I said, I need you to be completely honest and clear about your perception of me and your reflections of me as I go on over the next couple of months together. We're going to notice anything that is happening. If you're noticing a decline in my mental health, anxiety, anything like that, I might not be able to see it really clearly. So can we decide together and, be really responsible about the impacts if it has any impacts? And it was great. Yeah, I went on it, and we'd had touch points like a month in, 3 months in, 6 months in. And it didn't have any, which was great. And obviously I had healed a lot of stuff and I was regulating myself differently. But this is the stuff that we're not told. We're not told the side effects and the impacts, ways that hormonally, and mentally, emotionally, it impacts us. So I think the most important piece from this, right, is please, we now have so much awareness and support with like womb health specialists, and cycle specialists and everything like that. Take a look at all the options that are available. And make sure that you are making the most informed decisions you possibly can, because the side effects from misinformed decisions, I mean, they can be deadly.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these medications that were put on really early on, they will actually have in the listed side effects things like severe depression, like suicidal thoughts, and
Yeah.
our restrictions in New Zealand are, it's just wild, the drugs that the doctors are allowed to prescribe here, that they're not in other countries because of things like that. So just, yeah, let's just leave that as a no judgment, but
Yeah.
let's have some more conversations around these things so that women
Yeah.
are being able to make the most informed decisions for their bodies when it comes to things like our cycles and our and birthing and contraceptive. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's great to lead into that whole topic, we've just been talking about, is like our first sexual experience, because
Yeah.
being on the pill, your first sexual experience can be different. It can be different for everybody. It's like you learn about sex education in school to a degree of
A little
how,
bit.
how a baby's made and what a penis is and what a vagina is. And
Yeah.
and you all laugh. Like I remember being sat watching the old TVs, like,
Mhm.
and just
Oh
being
my gosh,
like,
yes.
you guys and girls there and you're just laughing. You're all like
Did you
12.
have, we had, I went to, when we did sex ed at, a girls' college that I went to, we had the wooden penises. They
Oh
brought
yeah.
them all out. They brought out all the wooden penises for us to put the condoms on. I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. Yeah, so I mean, there's some bits, but it's pretty fucking minimal, right? They don't talk about the psychological, emotional, mental, any of that kind of stuff when it comes to sex. So like, here's to here's how to have sex and not get pregnant. And it's like, they don't talk about pleasure. They don't talk about emotional connection. They don't talk about how to be most present in your body. They don't talk about the potential things that might happen after a not so good sexual
Yeah.
experience. They don't talk to you about consent.
They don't talk to you about your actual first sexual experience can be quite painful. Because,
Yeah.
like my first sexual experience wasn't pleasurable at all. It was,
Yeah.
I bled. Like it was not a nice experience that first time. And I think we just go into like these rites of passage. We go into these stages in life not prepared and being like, what the fuck just happened? Like,
Yeah.
and then you just kind of like, for me, I just felt, when I think about, it's funny we're talking about this because it's been coming up for me the last few days with being ill. And I remember being from the age of 12, I would say, up to about 26, numb, just numb. Like living day by, I had great experiences, great holidays, great friends. I had, normal life things, falling out, just all the usual things. But after learning what I'm learning with my qualification, is like I've been a freeze response that whole time because I don't like
Mhm.
confrontation. I don't like fights. I don't like falling out. I never stuck up for myself. I was always just a people pleaser. So you would say fawn freeze. I was always in a fawn freeze response. And
Yeah.
for these last few months, I have gone from a freeze into a fight flight. So now I'm starting to
Mhm.
feel everything
Mhm.
it's like I'm feeling it for the first time. And
Mhm.
it's like, that's my bowel stuff going on recently has been like, because it's so like it's there and I can feel it. And when I've got the belly ache, I'm like, I need to feel this, feel it, Pip, feel into it.
Feel it.
And that's kind of like what my it's like my nervous system going, feel me, because you haven't felt me in so long. Like
Mhm.
we've got stuff to tell you, we've got stuff to show you. And it's so
Mhm.
I feel like that those two responses for me have been my comfort zone of, people pleasing, freeze. Like if it got difficult, like I mentioned to you on the other episode, when things get difficult, I just want to go shut off and go, it's okay. Don't do the work, just get on with it because of my own experience. And I think that's kind of like when we lead into our experiences in our rites of passage is like there is no preparation. Like our ancestors would prepare people, they would go through like a whole ceremony and they probably do this whole like, oh, she's becoming a woman, let's honor her. And they dress her up and they
Yeah.
would make a spectacle. They would make her feel special and feel like this
Mhm.
becoming a woman. You know, it's like, I know it's obviously different and different traditions and different cultures and different religions. I can't speak for all of them, but it's like, again, we've forgotten how beautiful it is to move through rites of passage, to move through stages.
Mm.
We're just kind of on this like treadmill, just going, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Taking off the things.
yeah,
For what? Missed
yeah,
opportunities, right?
yeah.
Mm. Okay, so after your first sexual experience, can you describe any feelings, any beliefs, any things that were activated or came up during maybe just that really recent period of time straight after? Can you describe any of them?
From what I remember, my first experience was with technically was quite reckless, really. I felt quite ashamed of what was that even for? Like I wasn't even in a committed
Mm.
relationship. Like I wasn't even in a, hey, like some sort of trust. Just just giving my body to someone at that age, like 14. I'd actually, I don't mind talking about it. My mum and dad had a holiday home in Spain. We've been going that place since I was like 4 years old. So we got to know the local Spanish guys, and we spent a lot of time with them in summer and stuff like that whenever we used to go. And I just had a real connection with one of them. Like he couldn't hardly speak English. I could only speak a little bit of Spanish. It's funny because like he's my first. So it's like, it was always as I got older, I'd always see him and we'd wave and my dad would make jokes and say, Pip, Pippa Bambino. And he'd be like, no, no, not mine. It was like always a joke because my mum and dad knew because we'd always hang around with them and it was always just like, and I did have that connection, but when I lost my virginity to him, being a 14-year-old, I just felt like, oh, it was just a thing. It was just, to me, it was just a
Mm.
thing we did. It was just a thing. It's like I
That
watch
happened.
movies and series, and especially from like the 1800s and 1900s, how like the first sex was like this big consummate the marriage, like, how it's
Mm.
changed culturally, like especially in
Yeah.
our culture, it's like it just becomes just sex. It's just sex. It's not like what you just said. The emotions, the
Yeah.
pleasure, the feelings, the trust,
Mm.
the unity, like sex is is
Mm.
is is pleasurable and it is part of what we've been given and we're gifted all these beautiful things. But it's more than that in a sense. Like I said now, if I knew what I
Mm.
knew now, I just wouldn't have had sex with anybody.
If only we knew what we knew now.
Like I would have
Yeah.
tried different things. I would have been like, hey,
Yeah.
let's not do the sexual intercourse. Hey, can we do some like touch? Can we do some tantric stuff? Can we connect? Can we,
Can you
like that?
imagine us at 14? I don't think
Therefore,
that.
so I think if I told my
I know.
14-year-old self that, she'd be like,
Yeah.
what are you smoking, Pip? Like, because
Yeah.
she wouldn't have known that stuff because she's just in
Mm-hmm.
that, she's
Mm-hmm.
just in it's like that numb, like it's a thing
Mm-hmm.
we do. My friends were doing it. My friends were doing it, so I should do it.
Yeah.
It became something that was just a thing that we did. Your friends smoke, oh, I start smoking. It's just, and I think that also leads into that process of like wanting to fit in, wanting to belong,
Yeah.
wanting to be in the normality of what we say is normal in this bubble. So I think it's just now as we are, it's like, hey, I don't want to fit in the bubble. I'm out of the bubble. I've got my own
We're having a
beliefs.
party out there
Yeah.
outside of the bubble.
Yeah. So I think
Mm.
ashamed, I would say, from what I can
Yeah.
think, and dirty. I just felt
Yeah.
like that was just not what I expected. I was always a big romantic. I still am. Love
Mm.
romance. I was a Disney nerd, still am. I love the whole love and I love the whole like special of how things are meant to be and how I want things to be. So my first sexual experience was not that.
Not that. Yeah.
So yeah, quite disappointed really.
Yeah. I'm going to drop in a language change that was introduced to Johnson. I almost said his name. I still probably won't on his name, his actual name. So Johnson and I, in the Sex with My Ex podcast, we interviewed Dr. Tara, who is a sex lecturer, university
I
lecturer
actually listened
over
to
in
that one. It was
America.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and so she said we're changing the language from losing our virginity to sexual debut.
I
And
love
which is
it.
a much more empowering connotation, as opposed to this losing of something. So sexual debut. I'm going to share my experience, and there's two parts. Uh, and there's two parts because I had an experience prior to penetration, which broke my hymen, and was pretty traumatic. And then the actual first penetrative experience was actually super beautiful. Like there were awkward parts to it and everything, but it was quite beautiful. So yeah, I would have been. It was on my 14th birthday that we had our first penetrative experience.
Yeah.
Before that, I was in a really not a very good state. I was really not a very happy teenager in a lot of ways. And it was lots of drinking and suppression of traumatic memories, and yeah, trying to fit in and trying to belong, and trying to find myself and trying to numb myself in every way I possibly could, really, because yeah, I had a lot of stuff that was stored in my body and in my psyche that I wasn't processing, and it was having its effect on me. And so, yeah, I was out one evening in town, and we met a group of people, and one of the boys there, a little bit older than me, like maybe 2 years older than me, ended up taking me back to his hotel room. And this is going to be a little bit graphic. I'm just going to put a trigger warning in, just so that you guys all know that. And had his fingers inside of me that so violently that he actually broke my hymen.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine actually how forceful that was. And I just remember I was in and out of it because I was like drunk, but I just had this vivid memory of this guy's hand like in front of me, just covered in blood, just
Yeah.
like blood everywhere. And again,
Yeah.
instantly shame, not fuck, am I okay? Like, is something wrong with me? Like, am I dying? Just shame
Yeah.
straight away. I remember like I stayed at my friend's house that night and just crying on the toilet, like bleeding, fucking blood everywhere. And I was like crying to her because the other part of it was now I'm not a virgin. Like I had this thing in my head of like, now that I've had my hymen broken, like I'm not a virgin anymore.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to a few months later, meeting my boyfriend at the time, who's my Sex with My Ex co-host. And it was really beautiful. We dated. I think we'd maybe already been dating a few months. And it was really lovely. We kind of set up this space. It was like there were some parts that weren't lovely, like it was in like the boys' college boarding hostel. But we were together and we really cared about each other, and we really were each other's first love. And it was my 14th birthday. And it was awkward, and there were weird things, but we really loved and cared about one another. And we're good friends now. So every time it's my birthday, I'm like, happy sex anniversary. And I send him a message. And so I'm blessed, and I feel really grateful that that part of the experience was intentional. Again, no pleasure. And probably a lot of it was I was quite disembodied. I didn't have any drugs or alcohol or anything, which was good. So I wasn't, there weren't any other substances. And it felt quite empowering
Yeah.
to, I would have been one of the first in our peer group. But there was this element of that of, I almost had this, I'm this now because of this experience that I had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it kind of led to not great things after that, using sex definitely as a disembodiment tool and all those kinds
Yeah.
of
I
things.
relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that first part, man. And then the one thing that was coming up when I had my first penetrative experience was he's going to think I'm not a virgin because I'm not going to bleed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I had all this fear inside my body of like, oh my gosh, he's going to think that I've had sex with someone else, but I haven't. And how am I going to talk to him about that?
Yeah.
And all those things. It's funny because we did an episode on it, our first episode in the
Yeah.
podcast. We talk about it. He's like, oh, I didn't even think of that because he was so uneducated.
Guys
I was
don't,
like,
they
oh,
just wouldn't
really?
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Like he had no idea. Yeah, I mean, two young people, what do you do? So I think that the more that we have these conversations, the more we realize that people's experiences are really similar. And so it's this, so how can we do better as a society, right? How can we keep normalizing these conversations, doing the work to transmute those traumatic experiences in the body,
Yeah.
having open conversations about pleasure, not being this shame thing, and yes, sex being sacred again. Obviously it's an area I'm super passionate about.
Yeah.
And so on this topic, I'm going to tell you guys something really exciting that's happening in my personal life. I have a job interview on Tuesday for Total Kumai, which is a sexual awareness support organization running
Awesome.
consent education programs in high
Oh,
schools.
that's awesome.
Which I'm really excited about. Yeah, so it's in high schools, and then it's with teens and adults who've got special needs as well. And it's just,
I love
I
that.
love, I
That's so
love, and
your
I'm
alley.
celebrating. Yes, that we're in this place in society where we're having consent
Yes.
conversations with young people. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. So that feels cool. That feels like a step forward.
Definitely. And I wish you lots of luck, even though you probably don't need
Yeah.
it. I want to
Thank
ask you a
you.
question because
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking it from a place of like, is it relatable to you? When I
Mm-hmm.
reflect on childhood, reflect on like, after getting your period, so, after 12 years old, do you find that a lot of your sexual experiences are blurred?
100%.
I just felt like if I sat down and
Mm-hmm.
had to recount, which I couldn't, how many sexual experiences I've had,
Mm-hmm.
I can remember quite a few of them, but a lot of them I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I was probably drunk, on drugs.
Disembodied.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
drunk,
you mentioned,
drugged, and then
disembodied.
not in
Yeah,
the body because it felt safer to not be in the
yeah, and
body.
how people use sex as a escape tool, and it was like you
Yeah.
mentioned. I think this whole "oh, I'm not a virgin anymore" becomes this empowering kind of element to life, but really it's not. It's how you're going to use that now. Is it going to make you disempowered? Which was for me. Like I was just
Yeah.
reckless with very reckless, not using
Mm.
protection, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to heal a lot of shame around that as well, like just
Yes.
feeling like, especially with the miscarriage last year, like a lot of
Mm.
fear came up around, oh, it's my fault because I wasn't, I was reckless when I was younger and I didn't look after myself.
Mm.
I would get STIs, things like that, and have to have
Mm.
antibiotics. And I don't feel ashamed saying that anymore because like I used to be like, oh my God, you can't talk about that. It's the shame
Yeah.
around that too. Like it's
Yep.
so common in our society of not
Mm.
using protection and things like that. So I think for
Mm.
me, I'm all about just speaking truth because I don't feel ashamed anymore like I used to.
Mm.
But I think it's to share awareness around the fact that if I can share it, I hope you guys can too, because it's something that I want to be able to sit in a room and say, I had an STI and not feel that,
Yeah.
that dread and shame where like another woman might say, well, I've had one too, and how like it just,
Mhm.
there's this real shame around that, and especially being like younger as well and having to like tell your mom and having to
Oh,
go into like
yes.
she had to have like someone consent to like give you to go into the doctors and things like
Mm.
that. I remember having to go into like for the morning after pill when I was like 16. My mom was just devastated, and I didn't probably didn't need to because I was on the pill and the pill was 99% effective. But it just,
Mm.
when I think about all my old experiences, even for my first experience losing my virginity is still blurred to me because I probably was drunk. I was in Spain, you can drink there, it was really easy, and I think that's sad. To me, that's really sad
Mm.
for me. Like I'm sad that I don't remember like a lot of my sexual experiences because
I
they were
just
just, yeah.
I just had a really beautiful part to this come in though that I think is really nice is could it be possible that our higher conscious, our souls actually know how potent and powerful physical intimacy and connection is, and that there's a part of us that knows that that experience in itself is not going to have those sacred elements, and we're almost like doing what we can to keep ourselves safe from almost the potential of what that could be, but knowing that that's not really where we're at, right? It's like almost, it is a safety mechanism. It's a safety mechanism in a number of ways. But I just had this thought of maybe our higher conscious actually is coming in as well and is going, so this isn't quite what it could be. So let's
Yeah.
suppress the memories of like not quite what it could
Yeah.
be. And that's okay, and still allow the things to move through our bodies. but it's always these safety mechanisms, right? Honestly, if I could recollect a lot of my earlier sexual experiences, I've moved them through the body, but we don't have to remember them through here. If I did,
Yeah,
man, I would
yeah,
have them even more unraveling, from the age of, 14 to 18. Honestly, to be completely honest, I was talking to my best friend, Nat, about this before, because fuck, we used to get ourselves in really dangerous situations. I feel as if I was being looked after, because the fact that I wasn't murdered, kidnapped,
yeah,
seriously sexually assaulted. There definitely have been elements of sexual assault along the way in those early years, but like seriously, massively, physically, emotionally, sexually assaulted in those ways is a bloody miracle.
yeah,
The fact I didn't get pregnant. Like, I
yeah.
didn't get
Same.
pregnant until my ex-husband, until we had my daughter was born when I was 20. And I just look back, I'm like, how?
Yeah.
How? I thought I was infertile. When I
I did
met,
too. I did. I
yeah,
honestly
when I met
did.
my husband, I'm like, I don't think I can have babies. I've had
Yeah.
so much
I felt the
unprotected
same.
sex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I also
yeah.
think like I felt like I was infertile because I didn't get pregnant and I was so reckless. And then Chris and
Yeah,
I was like, let's start trying for baby. And the first month I was pregnant, I was like, what the fuck?
yeah,
I was just so
yeah,
shocked because I thought one of my beliefs was that I'm infertile when I was younger because I just never
yeah.
got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
But I just also think like I love what you said about the high conscious being like, no, we don't need to remember those things. It's okay. Like they were like whatever. They
Oh,
weren't good
good.
sex anyway. They were
Just moving
shit,
through the body.
Yeah. And I think,
Just heal them with pleasure,
yeah,
which I
I
love.
know for a fact between the ages of like say 16 maybe to like, 19, I'd say,
Mm,
sex was uh, a power tool for me. Definitely a power tool
yeah,
for me. It was
yeah.
he wants sex with me, so I'm seen. I'm heard. He likes me. I belong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
I have
sexy.
value. I have
I'm good
worth.
enough. And I think that's like becomes that
Mm-hmm.
addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have sex, and that means I've got them,
Mm-hmm.
or that kind of like it's toxic, but that's how you then start to be seen, heard, validated. So I think that whole like if we can talk about that with young girls, like it's going to be life changing for
Yeah,
them because it's going to be like, hey, I was
yeah,
there, I was
yeah.
I was reckless and
Mm-hmm.
stupid, but I
Mm-hmm.
am where I am now, and I'm glad I was that, and
Mm-hmm.
how touching on when we move through these rites of passage, we're actually grieving old stages of ourselves, old versions of ourselves, and we don't actually talk about that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the old Showy. Like, hi Showy, hi old Showy. Like, I never knew the old Showy. You never knew the old Pip. You just know Pip now
Mm-hmm.
in 2024,
Mm-hmm.
2023, from when we first met.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey, can we just have like space just to be like, I never got to meet that Showy, but if I
Mm-hmm.
did, like, oh wow, how blessed would I be? Because I've watched you grow from,
Mm-hmm.
from that version to that version. I think we need
Mm-hmm.
to have more, we need to have more around that. We need to be more like, hey, like you might be grieving an old version of yourself right now. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's literally like the
Mm-hmm.
death of an old version of you. And how would you grieve someone you've lost,
Absolutely.
Like
Mm.
that I'm really
And that an
passionate about.
acknowledgement,
Yeah.
right? There's, I think, when we look at fracturing that occurs within the system and with generational lines and everything, so much of it is a lack of acknowledgement. So a lack of acknowledgement of experiences, a lack of acknowledgement of emotions, a lack of acknowledgement of the past versions of ourselves, like the lack of acknowledgement which comes into the grief process, right? So it's, yeah, the welcoming in more of the journey of allowing the parts of ourselves to be seen without the lens of judgment. And if there is some judgment, that's okay, processing it. But can we just allow the parts of us to be seen exactly as they were, knowing that we were doing what we could with the tools we had at the time,
Yeah.
with the capacity we had at the time, with the support we had at the time. And so now going, okay, so beautiful. So now I know more and I can do more and I've learned more tools and more strategies, but also going, we're going to be in perpetual states of these cycles of grief. And so can we also not attach ourselves onto our identity right now? Can we detach ourselves from who we are in this job, in this career, in this age of parenting, in this relationship, as this woman, as this version of us, and go, I am this right now, and I'm open to who I continue to become, and I will allow in those processes of evolution and honor every part of me as we go, and honor the times when we were like, wow, like I didn't know anything that I knew now then, and that's okay. And it's exactly that, right? And I think that it's such a beautiful way of looking at these initiations through life, and the transitions, from the maiden to the mother to the crone and all these parts of ourselves, and just acknowledge the journey and acknowledge ourselves in these states of evolution, right?
I just had this vision, and it'd be so awesome if they can create this in the future. I would
Mm.
love it if like you could connect your memories to like a projector and be like, "Hey, Shari, do you want to come round tonight and we'll watch a movie? What movie is it? Well, it's my life. Do you want to come watch my life on a screen?"
Yeah.
Like if you could just like pull, because like I said, one of the superpowers I've always said I would love is to step in someone's whole shoes, like not just by empathy, but by like, hey,
Their
like
experience.
just for a moment, just look through their eyes for a flash
Mm,
second. I think the
mm,
world would have more peace if that was
mm,
available to us, even though we can do that
mm.
not logically, but so I think if I could just like tap into my memories and be like, here's like a flashback of Pip from age, from being
Yeah.
born right up to now, and just how much we would like. It would be really emotional, but even for me to watch it,
Yeah.
because some of the stuff we've never like I've forgotten about, like big milestones of like siblings being born
Mm,
and heartbreak and
mm,
losing people, and
mm,
I think it would just be absolutely incredible if we could do that for each other.
mm,
I really
mm.
do.
You know what I just thought as another initiation is like your first heartbreak.
Yeah, I
I
know.
was talking to actually the girl that does my eyelashes. She's super cool and she's got a 16-year-old daughter. And so my daughter's 12, her daughter's 16. So every time I go and see her, I'm like, so tell me what's happening in your daughter's life. I'm trying to get all these tips about raising a teenage daughter and single mom as well. So
Yeah.
she's super cool. And we spoke about, so her daughter's in a relationship now, and she's spoken about how one day that might be her first heartbreak, and how we having daughters going through this, and sons, obviously we speak about women in
Yeah.
here, but yeah, the initiations that we experience for
Oh,
through our first
yeah.
heartbreak, and I fucking almost started crying thinking about my kids going through their first heartbreak and knowing the potency and the power
Yeah.
in it,
Mm.
and going like, from that you learn so much, right? From that anguish and
I
that
know.
uncertainty and the fear that sits in it, that's what helps to shape us.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to recognize our initiations into new parts of ourselves come from often great tragedy.
Yeah, they do.
um so this is, obviously we speak about women in here. For those of you that don't know, I have spent the last year and a half developing a Rites of Passage program for teenage boys, which is launching in June, which is really exciting.
Hmm.
And one of the pieces that I brought to men when I was developing it, I came to them and I said, what can you define as your transition from boy to man? Is there a particular experience, event? Did you have any kind of initiations? Most of them said no, there was no initiation, but nearly every single one of them was like I'm not going to say traumatic, but an intense experience that occurred where they remember, like, I'm a man now. For one of them, it was when he joined the military.
Yeah.
For someone else, it was when he stood up to his dad for the first time. He saw the moment that his dad realized that he was physically, mentally able to stand up for himself, because there was physical violence and stuff in the home. It was fatherhood, these moments. And I just think, so, and that's what I use to create the experiences that we have in our Rites of Passage program. And this is the theme that is involved in all of them in terms of bringing them, is navigating through great discomfort.
Mm.
And we've done it in a group environment as navigating through discomfort as a group, coming through the experience and then journeying through it and being like, do you know what? We went through that and now we know more, we feel more, we've had this
Mm.
experience, and actually everything's going to be okay. And we've learned these things along the way. So imagine us all getting to look at life, no matter what age or stage, of going, this period of great discomfort is an initiation into the
Yeah.
next part of my life. How much more present can I be in this? Childbirth, great example of it. It is for us one of the most uncomfortable experiences
Mhm.
that we will ever navigate through, in terms of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
Yeah.
It is profound, and for a lot of women is disempowering. um I'm really grateful I had incredible births, and there were still elements to it. And even in really empowering births, like one was a hospital birth, two were home births. I pretty much got to go according to my birth plans, which was really beautiful, and still navigating through the parts of it. With my second birth, I was deep in the stages of grief from cutting my biological mother out of my life. And so it's like the grief and the anger was moving through with contractions,
Oh
and all
yeah.
these things. And so that journey of I'd love to plant the seeds into our psyche as collective feminine of, can we allow uncomfortable experiences within reason, obviously, to be our initiations into reclaiming new parts of ourselves. And like, I definitely feel like childbirth is one of those things of, there are ways that we can create as much as possible, surrender obviously to what's outside of our control, but create spaces where we can navigate through those the most presently, the most supported way, so that we get to honor the woman we were. And for those of you that have multiple children, I feel like every single one of my births was a new initiation. I thought I'd done it, and I was like, oh no, here we go again. Like, this is new again.
Yeah.
Obviously, new person, new woman at different ages. As again comes into the same conversation of, the system comes around childbirth in our culture, particularly, I think a lot of Western cultures, of it's an inconvenience. Let's subdue and suppress the pain.
Yeah.
Let's have a elected cesarean so we can like avoid all of that. Let's do this, let's do that. And often those things are not for the benefit of the baby or the mother, but we don't know what we don't know. And so, like, even when I was talking to someone about having a planned home birth with my second baby, she was like to me, is that legal?
I just didn't know.
She was like, is that legal? She wasn't from New Zealand. Is that legal? I was like, yeah, I was born at home in 1990. I was a home birth,
Yeah.
But even this, like, are you allowed to do that? Like, does the system allow that? And all the research behind more supportive environments for the woman and the baby, such as a home environment, birthing centers, minimized sensory things happening, all those things are just so supportive for the care of everyone involved. But it's, people don't know what they don't know. So again, opening up the conversation like we did around contraceptive of, there are more options than most of you think. And also, if you had experiences where you didn't know these things, we hold space for that. Let's let it move through, do the somatic therapy work so you're not holding on to those. I've had a lot of my female clients with birthing trauma. But yeah, let's keep having these conversations around, can we make these things the most empowering they possibly could be? And how can we collectively support an environment that does that, right?
Oh yeah, and that's why this is a two-parter, because I read a whole book on childbirth last year, and it's Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed. So part two, I'll just split out everything because I love that book. Like, I could reread it. It's so beautiful, and it's like, I think part two, we can touch on childbirth, marriage, becoming a wife, even becoming like a
Menopause.
stepmother and a mother, because they're like the
Yeah.
rites of passage of those, like how I can talk into them, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously, like you said, elder. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't talked about this yet, but grandparents and then the death,
I
it's
know. I
like,
can't
oh,
wait to be
I've been
grandma.
feeling my nan a lot the last few days, like a lot. Like, I've felt her a lot. And I had a little
Yeah.
cry yesterday morning to Chris. I was like, I just feel my nan's around me, because when I'm not well, she was such a sweet soul. She would just want to look after me and give me honey and lemon and
Mm.
get a
Mm.
little hot water
Thanks,
bottle for me. She
man.
was just like, my mum's like that too, just really loving, just want to look after me.
Mm.
And I said to my mum yesterday, I was like, I just want my mum when I'm not well. I just want my mum to be here, just looking after me. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm getting older now. Like, can I go back to being a kid? Thanks. But I like I said, rites of passage, like you said it at the beginning, like it has to be a two-parter, because it's like this, you and
Yeah.
I have such, big experiences through especially what we spoke
Mm.
about today, you know, first periods, first sexual experience. I'm
Yeah.
really glad I got to talk about mine, because I've never really spoke about it really. It was just a
Mm.
thing. It was just the thing. But it's a really, like you said, when do you become a woman? When you get your period, or when you're 18? 'Cause it's all about when you're 18, you become a woman. I'm like, when you get your period, I would think you're a woman because you can literally birth children at that age. That's scary.
Crazy,
Like at
yeah.
11 years old, I could have got pregnant. So
At
that,
9 years old, I could have got
yeah,
pregnant.
which is insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
So I think
Mm.
having these
And you know what I
conversations
think?
is, yeah,
You know what I think too is that it doesn't need to be a certain age or a certain thing.
yeah,
It can be a different experience for every
each
single
person.
transitioning
Mhm.
person from girl to woman, right?
Yeah.
And but let's create the spaces so that that journey and however it looks gets to be the most supportive for our next generation, and for everyone around them, because it will be different. However, it can still be the most cared for.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's what's missing in a lot of society, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You asked me two questions last week, and it's
Yes.
great that you asked me these two because it's so like fitting for last week's topic and today's. You asked me if I could have a chat with my teenage self, what would I say to
Mhm.
them? After today's like conversation, I would have said, just be yourself, because even though that sounds so cliche, being yourself is all you can be. By not being yourself, you aren't going to attract the people that really love you and really see you.
Mm.
Be yourself. That heart of yours, Pip, is so big. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as you get older. I would tell her to respect herself more, respect herself and
Mm.
see yourself from a higher perspective, and not see yourself as just a number. I just had no respect for myself at that age. Have respect for yourself and have so much love for yourself. I didn't love myself then, and if I could like if I would say if you could see me at 33 now, like you would be like, wow, Pip's done so much. So I think as teenage self, I'd just say just let go, have fun. Like, I wouldn't really change anything about my past, but have fun, but respect yourself and love
Mm.
yourself in the process. 26 year
Mm.
old Pip. I would I would have gone back and just said, hey, you're in for a really funny ride. Uh
Buckle in,
I,
baby.
yeah, I would have said I'm really proud of you for wanting to come off the pill, because that was a really tough decision, especially with all the shame around it. I would have told her that all the decisions you're going to make from now are going to lead you to the dreams that you've always wanted. Like at 26, I was going through heartbreak, so I think at 26, knowing what I've got now in my life and what I'm still working towards for my dreams, I think at 26 I would have been like, wow, like even though I knew it was possible, I still had that doubt. So I would have said, don't
Mm.
doubt. You deserve, like you've always known you deserve everything you dreamt of, all the love you want. So that was definitely being 26 was a really tough, not tough, but it was that real like shift from going from like I've always been spiritual, but I've never really known what it is, to then having a spiritual awakening. My first spiritual awakening was at 26, so it was like
Mhm.
after coming off the pill. So yeah, that's what I would have said, and just that I'm proud of them.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for
That
asking
felt
them the
really
really good
beautiful.
questions.
Yeah, and it felt really healing as well.
Yeah.
Mm. Um, okay, let me get my sexy joke. I don't think we can go back to any jokes without
No,
sexy
it's like you've
anymore.
set the tone now.
I have, of course, trust me to set a sexy
I might get my
tone.
dad to teach you one of his jokes that actually have to do like have to do physical things, and I'll probably make you laugh.
Yeah, yes. Okay. What goes in hard and dry, but comes out soft and wet?
I don't know.
Chewing gum.
You just have like a mental vision of a penis, don't you? Like,
Yeah, I knew. I purposely chose that joke just so there would be an image of a penis in your mind.
so funny. You just literally said I can't pick any other joke now that I have to Google dirty sexy jokes or
Yeah,
dirty
I
sex
love how I'm just
jokes.
messing up your whole Google searches after this. Meta's gonna be like, "Pip, you filthy, filthy woman."
I had a really good question to ask you for next week. I
Okay.
don't think I've asked this before. If I have, let me know. If today was the last day on Earth, how would you spend it?
That feels so good. I love it. Oh, yay. Okay, I'm gonna let my imagination go wild for that one.
Yes.
Oh,
You have to
there'd be
give
lots of
details
sex.
like from waking
Do I
up.
get okay?
Yeah.
Can I go to sleep? How
Going
long
to
do I
sleep
have?
is you dying, basically. So you got the whole day,
24 hours or 12?
24 hours. I'll be kind.
Yes,
You can have
thank you.
24
Okay,
hours.
good. 24 hours. I love because I'll stay awake. I can work with that.
Yes. Yeah, your last day on Earth, how would you spend it?
Okay, good. Thank you. I love that.
Thank you for a beautiful
Powerful.
topic and listening to me and listening to my part of my story and I
Yeah.
just love that safe space I get to share my journey with you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'd love to hear from you guys, your first experiences and the topics we went into, what your definition of a rite of passage is, the moment that you feel like, or the set of moments you feel like you transitioned from, that girl into that woman. We'd love people who've journeyed through menopause as well, because that's
Yeah.
not something we can personally speak about, to share their experiences. I have spoken to many women who've shared parts
Mm,
of it, but it's a really beautiful conversation. Again, there's not enough talk about it.
yeah.
There's like shame pieces on it. So yeah, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear your guys' stories as well. Yeah, and thank you for being in this. This felt like a really
Mm.
important conversation.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be doing a part two, to talk about more of the rites of passage. And
Mhm.
we're loving the topics and we would love to
Mhm.
hear from you. And again, any reviews that you've got, please send them in because they really help us and they inspire us all the time to just what we're doing. That's why we do it.
Yeah.
So reviews would be really appreciated. And we'll be back next week for another episode, guys. So wherever you are, take care. Love you lots.
Love you.
Mwah.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.